Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 12 of my Aki Kaurismaki season. Today we're going to talk about Drifting Clouds from 1996. Again, I'm watching this on the Aki Kaurismaki collection on Blu-ray from Artificial Eye. This is an essential purchase if you're interested in Kaurismaki. It has 17 feature films and 9 short films. This stars Kati Outinen, who's in a lot of Kaurismaki films, because again he does tend to have a stock troupe of actors, and it stars Kari Vananen as Lauri, and they're a couple. It has lots of familiar Kaurismaki faces. The one face it doesn't have is Matti Pellenpää, who has pretty much been in all of Kaurismaki films up to this point, who sadly died in 1995 at the ridiculously young age of 44. So I could be wrong, but I think he was meant to be in this film, but sadly died of a heart attack in 1995, and this was made in 1996. So it's another, if you're familiar with Kaurismaki films up to this point, you'll kind of understand the style of Kaurismaki. So it's another deadpan story about ordinary people and the hand that life deals them. So we're introduced to Ilona, who works in the Dubrovnik restaurant, which is kind of a dilapidated restaurant for old people. It's not modern in any way. It's been going for 30 odd years. And then we're introduced to Lauri, her husband. They have a dog together, and he's a tram driver. But again, this is a Finland where the economy is struggling. Again, it's still that wallpaper peeling off walls, strangely enough. That's where you usually put wallpaper. And you just have this sense of melancholy, a sense of a country on its knees financially, economically almost. So Lauri goes into work one day and finds out that they're laying off 4 tram drivers because people aren't using the trams. As one character says, people can't afford to even walk, so they're not using the trams as much as they used to. Buses are taking over. So the boss doesn't want to just pick 4 drivers to get the sack, so they draw cards. And this being a Kaurismaki film, obviously he picks a card, which means he gets sacked. He doesn't tell Ilona this, he keeps up pretenses until his last day, a month later, when he's in an understandably tetchy mood, and he finally confesses to her that he was given the sack a month ago and this was his last day. But it's alright because they've still got her job. She's a head waiter at the Dubrovnik. But then of course the Dubrovnik, which isn't doing great business, is bought over and the owner gives it up, and the staff get laid off. The staff includes a doorman, a chef with a drinking problem, and various other characters, and they're not kept on by the people who take the restaurant over. So obviously this couple who are married have to try and find other work, and throughout the film, just when you think one of them has found work, something happens and that opportunity gets taken away from them. I mean, this is, if you're not familiar with Kaurismaki's films, this is deadpan and this is pretty grim. People can look at it as being depressing, but I don't think it is. It's still funny. It's still that sense of humour. At one point, she goes to another restaurant to ask for a job, and the owner is pretty much saying, "How old are you? You're too old to be in this business." And she's like, "She's 38," and the guy says, "See, like I said, you could drop dead at any time." There's not a lot of smiling that goes on in this film. There's this general sense of melancholy, this general sense of kind of empty streets, and what business you can actually find isn't a lot. Ilona ends up working in this kind of beer and not very good food joint, which this guy who's a bit shady has set up. He's not paying taxes, as we find out later, and she's front of the house. She's also the chef, so she's like pretending that there's somebody in the kitchen, and she's like, but again, Kaurismaki's style means that when you're emotionally invested in characters and things happen, you get true and honest emotional responses without Kaurismaki using the standard cinematic cliches to get emotional responses out of an audience. There's no sentimental music, it's very still. The camera doesn't do there's not a lot of movement there. It's just pastel colours. It's just very static characters, but very much like Bresson, through that kind of style or perceived lack of style, you do actually get genuine emotion when you're invested in the characters. Again, I'm not going to go into the complete plot, but at the end of the film there is some hope for the future, and the end of the film is really powerful and emotional. And then when you find out that Matti Pellenpää died the year before, I think the ending of the film takes on even greater significance. I mean, so far in this series, I've liked all of Kaurismäki films. I think his batting average has been pretty high. I've given most of his films 4s out of 5s. Not that matters, this is just my opinion, obviously. My opinion is not fact. But Drifting Clouds, for me, is his first 5-star film. Obviously I'll have to rewatch them all, but I think he does have a very high batting average. So this might be my first 5-star film that he's done, well, that I've seen so far in this series. His batting average is really high. This one was, for me anyway, overwhelmingly powerful and emotional. I was blubbing like a small child at certain points, because again, that emotion and humanity and the showing of these two characters, their resolve after they get setback after setback, is just true and wonderful, and it's not manipulative. It's not desperately trying to get emotion out of the viewer. It just shows you what's happening to these characters. It just shows you that life at the end of the day is not very forgiving. There are no forces involved. Life just throws stuff at you and you just have to deal with it. And these two characters just plod on and plod on, and just get through it until the next thing they have to get through. I mean, again, this will sound grim and depressing to people who perhaps haven't seen Kaurismaki films before, but again, there's a lot of humour in it. It's a certain kind of humour, but there's still a lot of humour. The stuff that happens off camera and then the characters walk back into after something that's happened, which can be very funny. Again, there's just wonderful, I mean, deadpan is just like the wrong term to use, but it is that kind of very dry humour. But again, I just feel this one had a tremendous emotional wallop for me anyway. I mean, I know other films, people have said, you know, they're the ones that are more emotionally resonant. But for me, this is the one was really emotionally resonant. Great performances as usual from the troupe of Kaurismaki actors. Again, this is not melodramatic acting. This is very small acting and very detailed acting. It's not showy. It's not. There's no scenery that gets chewed in Kaurismaki films. Another wonderful performance by the dog. Gives a wonderful performance. So overall, it's right up there with my favourite Kaurismaki so far. Like I said, I think it is deserving of 5 stars because it's a truly wonderful film. It's a truthful film. It's an honest film, and I think, well, certainly for me, you have a very truthful and honest and emotional response to it. As we see what happens to these characters when, you know, their livelihoods are taken away from them, we see them building them back up. We see the different journeys that the characters go on who were at the restaurant at the start of the film and where they end up at the end of the film. Again, it's not a long film, it's just about 95 minutes. Kaurismaki films aren't generally that long because they don't need to be, and he knows that, which is one of his strengths, which is why, like I said earlier, I think he's got a very high batting average. He hasn't, well, in this series, he hasn't had a clunker, which is rare for filmmakers, not to have 1 or 2 clunkers, but for me, he hasn't had one yet. So that is Drifting Clouds. So please let me know in the comments if you've seen Drifting Clouds and what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me again for part 13. I think there's only 5 left on the set. But these are just, on the whole, wonderful films. Again, they're a certain kind of film. They have a certain kind of humour that perhaps not everybody's going to like. But they're tremendously humane films without using cliche, without using manipulative cinematic tricks to get responses from the audience. So thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you'll join me again, like I say, for part 13, because that's the number that comes after 12. And hopefully that will be relatively soon. So thanks very much for watching. This is Soldier Own, from Solid Showing Films, saying cheerio.